This is the Spirit and Wellness Show. News and information from a higher perspective. With your host, Harry Wilkinson.
Yes, welcome to the Spirit and Wellness Show. I am your host, Harry Wilkinson, and this is the show where we take a look at the days and weeks, events, and look at them from a higher perspective. And we also talk about how we can integrate practices that are healthful in dealing with all of the things that we are exposed to, have to deal with in the course of our lives. Much of the information that is thrown at us, that we are bombarded with actually through various media, can be a little overwhelming, to say the least. Can be a little stress-inducing, if you will. And so I try to use an approach which helps us to look at these situations that we might have issues about, we might become stressed over, and look at them in a way that helps us to incorporate them, and not just incorporate them, but use them as tools for growth. And I've mentioned this on the show many times, but it always bears repeating, so I'll repeat it again. You know, I know a lot of spiritual seekers who say that, you know, the news and the media are such negative influences, that the stories they report, the things that they dwell on, are such negative situations that you just simply have to unplug from them. You just simply have to walk away from them and not listen to them. Which is, you know, on the surface, a common sense approach. However, not very practicable. We're surrounded by this stuff. So unless you're willing to move to a mountaintop and unplug all of your technology, computers, cell phones, tablets, everything else, unless you're willing to do that and disengage from society, you're going to be exposed to these things. And trying to push them aside simply gives them more power in your life. Trying to hide from them or disconnect from them or even just walk away from them makes them have more power than they ought to have. That's another issue. The third issue is that not only is it fairly well impossible to disengage from these things, not only does it give those things more power over you, you're actually losing a very wonderful opportunity for personal and spiritual growth when you disengage from them. And what I mean by that is all of these things that are out here, all of these things that are being reported and that we perceive coming to us through the media are actually things we have created as the spiritual beings that we are, at a much higher level, through our co-creation with Spirit. We create these situations, if you will. I like to think of them as holograms. If you remember from Star Trek Next Generation, the Enterprise had a holodeck on board in which crew members could engage in various situations and immerse themselves in them, whether it be, you know, medieval sword fighting or whatever else. The hologram would give a set of parameters, a set of difficulties or a set of challenges to be overcome, and the crew members would engage in dealing with these things. From them, it gave them personal strength. It gave them a sense of excitement. It gave them a sense of thrills, if you will, in some cases. In some cases, it honed various skills, fighting skills, and so forth. And I submit, and I'm not anywhere near the first person to ever say this, but I submit that all of what we perceive around us is simply that, are these holograms we've created on a spiritual level to help us to understand who and what we truly are as beings connected together in spirit, and to help us understand how powerful we truly are, and help us to recognize how these experiences may help us grow. And I'm going to talk about some rather difficult things today, particularly having to do with news reports, having to do with tragedies that occur on a national level, because I think it's important that we understand what these things are telling us about ourselves. So we're going to talk about those things today, and we're also going to talk about a very powerful tool to help de-stress. And it's a tool called guided meditation. Guided meditation. We talk about meditation all the time on this show. Guided meditation is a way of using imagery, and we also call it guided imagery, to bring us into a meditative state, to bring us into a calming state, to reduce stress. So we're going to talk about guided imagery, guided meditation, what that means, how you can use it, where you can go to find out more about it. We're going to talk about all those things. So, but first today, I want to talk about the fact that we are about to find out more than we ever realized about our universe and about who may be inhabiting our universe. The technology in various telescopes and so forth, and in our satellites and space equipment in general, is showing us new planets, new worlds around us that we didn't realize. And of course, there's always the debate, well, is there intelligent life other than us in the universe? And, this is an exciting debate that we have all the time, that we talk about all the time. This is one of the things that I love about these holographic creations, these holographic discussions that we have. Because we create illusions, in these debates. We create this idea that maybe there's not intelligent life in the universe other than ours. And so we debate that as if that makes sense, as if that is even possible, rather than the real discussion, which is what constitutes life, what constitutes intelligent life, and where could you possibly go to not find that? So it's always interesting to me when we talk about these things, is there intelligent life on Mars, for instance? Well, scientists are approaching it from a way of looking at water that they've discovered is deep under the crust of Mars, which means that life would be within the water. Looking at the old rocks and things that tell us when there might have been previous life on Mars. So the idea, and this is an idea that many people talk about in relation to our Earth and in relation to the environment. The idea that the Earth itself is an intelligent life form. The idea that the interactions that go on in, within, around our planet, and also other planets, signify that the planet itself is intelligent life. Doesn't seem to get much discussion, and I don't understand why. We can talk about plant life. We know that plant life is certainly intelligent. Plant life knows how to move, how to take care of itself, how to breathe, okay? Other forms of life, other forms of plant life that we may not even know or have an understanding or grasp of, certainly will be discovered. Certainly, if we don't know them already, certainly we will find out more about them. So this idea that somehow there's still this great debate about whether there's intelligent life out there is kind of silly. I think it more has to do with the kind of life that we're looking for. If you're looking for Mr. Spock to show up, we may not find him. But we may find all kinds of other interesting things. And here's where I really think the kind of intelligent life that we are excited about finding may not be in this dimension. And what I'm saying is that the sorts of other kinds of intelligent life that we might be interested in finding may be multi-dimensional. In other words, they may be right here, right now, sitting right next to us, but they're on a plane or dimension that we don't know exists yet, or that we are unable to see. And therefore, we don't think they exist. Again, this is not a new theory. In many ways, it is the theory that was put forth in the movie and the book Contact, which was written, many years ago, and of course the movie itself with Jodie Foster came out in '97, I guess, '98, somewhere around there. But that is what is postulated in that book, and that book is written, of course, by well-renowned scientist. So, what has to happen is our broadening of the definition of life and what that means. We are accustomed to, I guess, wanting to see exciting alien beings like we see in movies and television. And that certainly is possible, but along the way, maybe we're overlooking a lot of other types of life that are just as important and just as exciting, if you think about it that way. All right, so now I want to talk about how we perceive some of these tragedies in the news. I'm struck by the fact that over the past 6 months to a year, there have been these horrifying incidents that have happened. From school shootings that kill 5- and 6-year-old children, to a gentleman like Ariel Castro, who kept 3 young girls imprisoned in his house for over 10 years repeatedly beating them, raping them, and actually producing a child with one. These incidents that we've seen happen, when we think of the people who've done them, we turn in horror. We call them monsters. We say, oh my God, well, who could possibly do such a horrifying thing? What is wrong with this? Why did they snap like this? What is wrong with this person? And, we like to condemn them. It gives us it does several things. First of all, knowing that on the highest level we all are one, when we look at someone who has committed a crime of this nature, we see a dark side of ourselves that we don't want to see, that we don't want to think that we could possibly ever indulge in. And so the way we protect ourselves from that is by disengaging from that person, making them the other, making them the monster who would do some horrible thing like this because they have no willpower, they have no ability to make right choices, they have no morality, they're evil incarnates, all of these judgments that we place on these people. That protects us from ever having to think that we could possibly be capable of doing something like that ourselves. That's number one. Number two, it makes us feel better about ourselves and the things that we are going through in our lives, because it empowers us to feel better than the person who has committed this awful act. Well, I would never do something like that, so I'm a much better person than that guy. And that's a very powerful feeling. That's a very powerful illusion. That's something that, people kind of build a sense of self-esteem around, a false sense of self-esteem, but it's something we all do. We still do. And it's very easy to do. But what I want to suggest today is that these people's behavior, these people's acts, are not acts of evil, not acts of disregard for human life, aren't acts of willful defiance of morals or laws. That these acts are acts that come out of impulse, and that these impulses are something that happen because of incidents in the brain. Incidents in the brain that could happen to any of us. Incidents in the brain that could literally turn us into someone like an Ariel Castro or a shooter in a school. So to talk about this, I want to tell you about an area of science that is known as neurolaw. And I want to tell you about a gentleman who is at the forefront of neurolaw, a gentleman by the name of Dr. David Eagleman. And what neurolaw is basically it's a field of study that looks at the effects of neuroscience on the brain, as we learn more about how the brain works and how the brain can be damaged, and the influences that even the smallest changes can have in our behavior, in our reactions, in our choices. how that should guide our creation of standards in society and our laws. And basically, there's many ways that this works, from being able to predict how certain people might behave based on what their brains look like, to knowing how to know when a person has reached a cognitive state where they can no longer be capable of recovery in an accident. But the area that I want to talk about is in this legal area, particularly in the idea of defenses for people who have committed crimes that, like I've been telling you about. The idea of, an insanity defense is not new. However, courts became increasingly narrow in their definition of what constitutes a mental illness that would be the cause of criminal behavior. And it narrowed basically because of one gentleman who you may remember, John Hinckley, who was the shooter who tried to kill Ronald Reagan to impress Jodie Foster. He was acquitted, and he was acquitted because it was determined that he just simply was insane. And what happened was, after that happened, courts began to look at insanity defenses much more narrowly. In other words, unless you could prove that a mental illness actually kept that person from knowing that they were committing an act that was wrong, or knowing what would happen if they did that act, they couldn't be tried as mentally handicapped. But what neuroscience is showing us is that this approach is probably incorrect, because when we understand particularly what's happening in what's known as the prefrontal cortex in the brains of many people who have committed crimes, what is starting to arise is the idea of irresistible impulse. And many courts are starting to see that as a grounds for mental illness. And this is one of the factors that neuroscience has really been in the forefront of making people aware of. The argument is based on an understanding that decisions are made before the person is able to consciously realize what is happening, and that they have little or no control over what they are doing due to impaired functioning of the prefrontal cortex. And that's just one area of it. But I want to read to you an article, and I'll be brief, about this situation, written by Dr. Ullman, about how this all works. And he details two cases. One is a case of Charles Whitman, who you may remember was a gentleman who went to the University of Texas Tower in Austin, climbed to the top of it, and began shooting people. And this man wrote a note that said, "I don't really understand myself these days. I'm supposed to be an average, reasonable, and intelligent young man. However, lately, I can't recall when it started, I've been a victim of many unusual and irrational thoughts." Well, the police shot him. after he had killed and wounded many people. And it turned out that in the early hours of the morning on that day, he'd murdered his mother and stabbed his wife to death. Of course, this is a very shocking case, of course. But as they began to perform the autopsy and look at his brain, they discovered that he had a tumor called a glioblastoma. And this had compressed the third region of his brain, impinging on the hypothalamus and compressing the amygdala. And what they discovered was that these damages to his brain are what made him impulsively do these things that he could not understand. And he was alone in this fight against his own brain. And here's something that from his suicide note, where he talks about his doctor. I talked with a doctor once for about 2 hours and tried to convey to him my fears that I felt overcome by overwhelming violent impulses. After one session, I never saw the doctor again, and since then I have been fighting my mental turmoil alone, and seemingly to no avail. So that's one very famous case. Another case that he talks about, Dr. Eagleman, in this article, which is in theatlantic.com, is the case of, in the year 2000, a 40-year-old man, and he doesn't name him by his full name, who began to experience a change in his sexual preferences, and he began to develop this interest in child porn. And not a little interest, as Dr. Eagleman points out, but a very overwhelming one. So he spent his time in these websites and magazines. He began soliciting prostitution at massage parlors. This is something that he'd never done before. He reported later that he wanted to stop, but the pleasure principle overrode his restraint. He was discovered by his wife, and his collection of child porn had been revealed. He was removed from his house. He was found guilty and sentenced to rehabilitation, apparently in lieu of prison. And during the rehabilitation program, he made inappropriate sexual advances towards the staff and other clients, and then was routed towards prison. But what was happening to this man was, at the same time, he was complaining of worsening headaches, and was brought to the emergency room, where he underwent a brain scan. And what was revealed was a massive tumor in his orbital frontal cortex. They removed the tumor, and Alex's sexual appetite returned to normal. A year later, this pedophilic behavior began to return. They looked at his brain again. They discovered that a portion of the tumor had been missed and was regrowing, and they removed that, and again his behavior returned to normal. So, when you think about what these changes in your brain and your brain chemistry can do to you, can do to your behavior, perhaps it changes how willing we are to place judgment and moral disgust on people's behavior that we cannot understand, because of what they're going through, or something they're going through, that we very well could go through one day. I want to talk more about this, and I will next week. I'm sorry I didn't get to guided imagery today, but we'll talk about that next week as well. run by. So I want to wish you a wonderful week, and see you next time.